Alright, in this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to assemble and basically put together a 2Fiddy frame, including the electronics, the Betaflight configuration, Pidtune, all of that. I'm going to go through all of it, so stay tuned. But if you are a novice builder and you already know how to do all the electronic stuff, and maybe you just need a little clarification about how this frame goes together, well, stay tuned, because that's literally what I go through in the first portion of this, and then after that, you can go ahead and drop off and do your thing. But let the video play in the background. Just, help me out. It helps the algorithms. But for the rest of you guys, grab your tools. Let's jump straight into it. And don't forget to take your time, pause the video as much as you need, replay things that you need to, and let's get to it. So here are the tools that you're going to need to do this build. You need an M1.5 and 2mm hex driver, a small Phillips screwdriver, soldering iron, flush cutters, some double-sided sticky tape. And here's the components we're going to work with. Obviously got the 2Fiddy frame kit. We got the CADX Vista kit with the Nebula camera. Also the DJI cam will be fine. We got the iFlight IF7 Beast, whatever, yeah. 2004 motors, 2400 kV. This is going to be a 4S build. Now, here are all of the parts, the carbon parts in your kit. If you're missing something, email us at customer support. Here's all the hardware. You got some standoffs, some bolts, zip ties, and some hardware for your flight controller. And of course, you've got a battery strap. All right, really quick, just for people that want to jump ahead, here's how the motor arms connect. You want to make sure that the long side of the edge points out to the sides. All right, so let's start off with the tallest, longest bolt that you've got. This is the M3x10, and you're going to put these on the outer holes for the arms. I like to put them first through, and then put the cross brace, make sure that is secure, and then you want to grab the M3x8. Just ignore the color here. Your kit should be all of the same color. But the M3x8, the middle size screw is what's going to go on the inner bolt holes of the cross brace. Take your M2 driver, go ahead and tighten that up, but you don't want to tighten it up all the way just yet, because you want to leave a little wiggle room to be able to mount the rest of your arms. Once again, just make sure that your arm is going in the correct way. If it's not lining up, or if the holes don't line up, it's because these edges aren't touching the correct way. So here it is again, just to make sure you got it the right way. Go ahead and insert them in. I like to start with the outer bolt first and then put the inner bolts last. Once you got it, go ahead and tighten everything up, and it should look something like this. All right, next up, you got a decision to make. You've got these taller standoffs and you've got these shorter standoffs. If you're going to build it low profile like I am, like let's say you're using an all-in-one and you just need a single stack, then you can use all the short standoffs. But if you need the room, or you need to use a 2-board stack and you need to build it with a taller profile, you're going to use all of the tall standoffs to complete your build. You just need to put the M3x10 bolts through the other way on the outer bolt holes for the motor arms, like so, and then you can build it that way. However, I'm building mine with low profile using an all-in-one board, so I'm going to take this apart and we're going to go back to the short standoffs. Then you're going to grab your M3x6 screw and a tall standoff, and that is what's going to go onto the rear. Then take your M2 driver, go ahead and tighten everything up. All right, let's move on to the Fpv Cam Plates. Now, I'm going to basically finish putting together the frame just in case you are a little bit more advanced and you don't need to see how you go about the electronic parts. Basically, grab the cam plates. There is a left and right to these, so just make sure that the side with the chamfering goes on the outer edges. Insert them in through the tabs with the slots, and then take your top plate and place it on top and make sure everything lines up. It should look something like this. Then you're going to take your cam retainer plates. Now there is no left and right here, but there is an up and down. So just be sure to check out this picture because the rounded side should be on the bottom. And they just slide through on the side just like so. Let me show you again here with the other side. Just take it, line up the slots, push them in, and then you're ready to insert your tall standoffs. The front cam cage takes 2 of them, and you're going to secure these standoffs using the shortest M3 by 6mm bolts. However, I'm going to take this apart now because I'm going to basically show you step by step for those of you who want to see full instructions from start to end using the electronics suggested. Just keep watching. All right. So the first thing you want to do is get your flight controller ready, and the first thing you want to do that is to insert the rubber dampeners. Now make sure you got them facing the right way. There is a side of the gummies that has a little bit more of the spacer on them. You want that to be on the bottom, and you want the thin side of the dampener to be up top. And if you're confused, just know that the top side of the flight controller is the side that has the USB connector. All right. Now that we've got the flight controller prepared, let's take the flight controller hardware included with your kit. It is these longer M2 bolts along with 4 of these 6mm M2 standoffs. So put the M2 bolts through, get your standoffs, and tighten them by hand. And once you got them all through, go ahead and take your 1.5 driver, hold the standoff with your fingers and give it about another 1/4 to 1/3 of a turn, and that should be plenty tight. Alright, now that you got that, it's time to put your flight controller on. However, at the time of this video, this is the correct way. That is, up facing forward. However, you'll notice that this flight controller, along with pretty much every other flight controller on the market, the USB will be inaccessible because of the standoff. So you can do what I do and basically clock it counterclockwise, and what we'll do is go into Betaflight CLI command and remap the resource motor mapping a little bit later. Also check underneath, depending on what flight controller you have, you just want to make sure that none of the components are touching the carbon. Alright, so now it's time for the cap. Now, there is enough space on the frame to mount the cap somewhere inside the main body. It will be a tight fit, but it is possible. However, to keep things simple, I just like to mount my cap directly onto the XT30 battery lead. I feel like it's just a little bit simpler and just easier to do. A little bit of heat shrink and you're good to go. Next, let's measure out how much wire we need. I like to be perfectly exact. As long as the bottom of the cap extends from above the top plate, that is plenty of lead. Alright, so now it's time to strip the wire and tin it and basically get it ready to be soldered onto the flight controller. Now if you're new to soldering, generally you want to have high heat so that you can do things as quickly as possible. You don't want to be keeping your soldering iron in one spot for too long because then things happen. Alright, so now we are going to mount the motors. If you take a look in your bag of your box of motors, you'll notice a couple of screws. There's some titanium ones. Those are lightweight bolts for the prop. Set those aside, but you'll be left with 2 cap head screws. You got a long one and a short one. Use the long one. Basically what you want to do is just make sure that the bolt goes through flush with the base of the motor, but not so far that it extends and hits the stator. Yeah, alright. Alright, let's grab some zip ties and let's fix the motor wires in place. And then we will measure out the remaining part of the wire so that you got just the right amount of wire going to the solder pads on your flight controller. Once you got that measured out, go ahead and give it a cut and repeat this for the rest of your motors. Alright, once you got that, it is time to tin these motor wires as well as tin the solder pads on the flight controller. You can go ahead and pause the video here if you need to, because I'm going to jump ahead here real soon. I think I am. Yes, I am. There you go. There you go. Once you got everything tinned up, it's time to go ahead and solder everything. I like to lay the wire directly to the side and rest it right into the little pocket of the flight controller. Alright, so now that the flight controller is soldered up, let's go ahead into the iFlight box, and it should have included these clear plastic M2 nuts, and we'll use that to secure the flight controller in place, and hand tightened is fine for now. Alright, next up, let's get the CADX Vista kit ready. In your Vista kit, it should have included this cable right here. We're going to solder this up directly to the Vista unit. There is no repinning of the wires. They work perfectly for this iFlight F7 flight controller. So as long as you got all of the wires starting off correctly, for instance, the red to the VBAT pad, the rest of the wires should solder right up correctly in order. Should look like that. Alright, next let's install the antenna. Take an M1.5, loosen up that one corner, and take some tweezers so that you can lift the retainer clip out of the way. And once you get that out of the way, get your antenna and carefully, and I do mean carefully, seat this on to the UFL connector. It is easy to get this kind of bent and screwed up, so take your time, don't rush things, you'll be fine. Alright, once you got it on, take your tweezers and move that retainer clip back over. Now do note it will be a bit difficult once you got that antenna on, but be patient, use your tweezers, get that thing on there nice and secure, and then take your M1.5 driver and tighten that bolt back up. Next up, take some double-sided sticky tape, put it smack dab in the center of the Vista unit, and then you can go ahead and take out the tape now. I just realized that I probably should have done this part first, which is insert your zip ties. So do this first. Before you take your double-sided, that side of the tape back off, take your zip ties, run them through all of the holes in the Vista, because what you're going to use this for is a guide to basically mount the Vista onto the frame, ensuring that it is nice and centered. So you take the zip ties, run them through the Vista, run them through the frame, and then basically give it a tug. And what this will do is just basically make sure that your Vista unit is nice and centered to the frame. And once it's there, go ahead and give it a nice little push with your fingers, and that should be enough to settle the double-sided sticky tape. Once this is ready, you're going to pull out one side of the zip tie, take the other side that's still in there, and run it through that same hole and put it out through the top. Now I'm going to show you a little trick. This is just a neat little way to use the zip tie to secure the Vista onto the frame. So you're going to take the one that you pop back out, and you're going to use that to lock one side in, just like so. Make sure that's nice and tight. I'm a little out of frame here, my apologies. Then you're going to take the other side and run it through the second zip tie. That way the heads of the zip tie are within the frame and not sticking at the bottom. That way if you happen to scrape concrete or something like that, you'll have less of a chance of something catching it. And honestly guys, the double-sided sticky tape is plenty to keep the Vista unit in. I've crashed it plenty of times without zip tie or hardware holding it in, but I like to run the zip ties just to make sure, little extra safety and insurance. And once you're done, use some pliers to just make sure it's nice and tight. And once it is, take your flush cutters and cut the excess out. Next, take the connector and basically put a nice little twist to it. I like to do this just to keep things nice and neat. And then you're going to plug it into the flight controller. Now take note, the connector itself is one pin short of what the actual connector on the flight controller is requiring. So just make sure you push it in all the way to the left, and you should have this small little gap just like this. I promise it'll be okay. You don't have to change the connector out. You'll be fine as long as you got the connectors pushed all the way to the left. Alright, finally take a zip tie and zip tie the cherry antenna to the very back standoff, and then you'll do the same thing with the battery lead on the side connector. Now, take these screws, these are your FPV cam screws, and you're going to take your FPV camera, and now we're going to mount it onto the cam plate. Make sure you're paying attention to the left and right. Remember, the curved side is what should be facing the bottom. And you're going to use the center hole if you're using a Nebula camera. Alright, once that's in place, you can set the cam cage with the camera in place, starting by the slots at the bottom. Once that's in place, you'll take your top plate, run the tabs through those slots. You'll hear a nice little satisfying click. You might need to move it a little bit. And once that's in place, Take your retainer plate. Make sure there is no left and right, but there is an up and down, so pay attention to that. Take that and slide it through the side. When you put this retainer plate in place, it actually retains the top and bottom plate, which makes it easier to keep everything put together. All right, now take your M3 by 6mm screw, and you can put that in through the holes on the top plate. I like to just start off with the front just to make sure that everything stays in place. Then I'm going to take the taller standoffs and I'm going to put that up front. The cam cage takes 2 of them, and you're going to use the shortest bolts you got in the stack in your kit to keep those in place. Alright, once you got that, you might as well go ahead and basically put the rest of your bolts in. The rest of the kit basically uses the same screws, so alright. Cut up some grip. You're going to put dead smack in the center. Now you have another decision to make. If you're going to run your battery toilet tank style, basically running the battery sideways, you're going to feed the battery strap through the top and bottom straps like so. However, perfectly fine also to run your battery more traditionally up and down by running the straps through the sideways motions just like that, but underneath the top plate, obviously. Alright, now I am tightening everything up just to make sure everything is good. Finally, you want to set your cam angle, and I just like to eyeball this, but once you find the cam angle of your preference, take your small Phillips screwdriver and lock things in place. Alright, now remember how I told you about that USB? See, it's accessible now, which is great. You don't have to take the stand off to get to it, but now we're going to have to go into Betaflight to make some changes here. Alright, once you go into Betaflight, you want to connect, and the first thing you want to do is calibrate your accelerometer as long as your quad is leveled. That's something you definitely want to do. But let's go into ports, and the first thing you want to make sure is that UART2 is enabled for MSP. This is what's going to allow the DJI telemetry to go through. Obviously, if you're not running that, you don't have to worry about it. And if you're running the DJI radio, you want to set UART3 for your serial receiver. Obviously, if you're running something else like Crossfire, then you just want to make sure that you've got the appropriate UART enabled for serial. Once you hit save, it's going to restart things, so don't be alarmed if this is your first time. But let's go into configuration. Now, I like to run props out, so I have that enabled. And up to the right, you want to make your ESC protocol for DShot 600. We are running an F7 processor, so it will be able to handle that high of a protocol. Same thing down here. We are, well, you want to make sure that bidirectional D-Shot is enabled. Change your motor idle throttle value to 6%. This is going to help with the prop wash. More on the Pidtune later. Down here, again, we're running an F7 processor, so an 8 kHz PID loop will be plenty fine. And then I like to turn everything off except for accelerometer. Then you want to make sure that your protocol is set for S-Bus if you're running DJI, obviously Crossfire if you're doing that. And then the last thing I like to do here is I actually like to turn air mode off. I'll explain more on that a little bit later. Alright, once everything is good, make sure you hit save. And then we'll go over to the power battery and change this to 106. The default value is so inaccurate. I did a little bit of a calibration test and I found 106 to be pretty close to have an accurate current / amperage reading. Alright, let's go over to the Pidtune. Now, basically you want to enable expert mode up here up top, and then just follow these values on the sliders and you'll be good to go. And if you want a little bit more in-depth, or you want to understand the reasoning, the logic, all the testing that I did to get to this tune, check out the tuning video that I did on this, and that will explain everything there. Alright, just copy everything here, you should be good to go. Let's go over to the rate profile. This obviously is going to be your own personal preference, but if you want to see what I'm running, here it is. And then finally, let's go to the filter tab, and same thing, make sure you have an expert mode enabled, and then just follow these exact settings. Move your D-term over to 1.3. I like to turn off all of the low pass filters, and then these are the settings for gyro and dynamic notch filtering. Once you made those changes, be sure to hit save. And now let's go to the receiver. Here there should be nothing to change except for the smoothness. I like to run mine at 50. This is obviously going to be your own personal preference, But other than that, you might want to change your channel map if you've got a different radio. All right, moving on to the modes. Now, I like to run my ARM and air mode on the same switch, but I like to run the ARM on a medium to high. And the reason for this is because later on I'm going to show you where I do air mode. Well, let's talk about angle first. I like to put angle on a switch as well. And this is just more for like a safety. So if I ever have a video issue, I can flip it into angle mode. And then at the very least, I know that the quad is right side up. And at that point, I can do my best to try and land it safely. Just a little bit of an insurance thing. Now here's the air mode. Now if you notice, I have air mode and my ARM on the same switch, except I put the air mode on high. And what this allows me to do is if I ever want to perch, I basically turn air mode off. The quad remains armed, and now I can land without it doing the crazy bouncing that it does, which, trust me guys, with this aggressive of Pidtune, it will bounce on you if you try to land on something with air mode turned on. Alright, the rest are the things that you probably want to turn on, especially if it's a freestyle quad. Turtle mode, pick whatever switch you want to put that on, and then I also like to do a pre-arm, again, just as a safety thing. Alright, OSD. Here's what I like to turn on. This is another one of those things that's going to be your own personal preference, but I just wanted to show this in case you guys wanted to see what I personally do. Alright, now the nerdy stuff. So remember, we clocked the board counterclockwise 90 degrees, which means we need to go in now and remap the motor resource settings. So I've already done it on this board, but if you basically copy this right here, take a screenshot right now, and just enter in this exact piece of text that I have highlighted here into your CLI, and then hit enter. Oh, and there's another thing that we want to do here. I like to set the S-Bus Fast on. That enables Betaflight to see the DJI Fast S-Bus protocol. This gives you that 7 milliseconds. Believe me guys, it makes a difference. Alright, next up, we want to flash BLHeli-M onto the ESCs. Here is the link to where you download the configurator. Now, just be heads up fellas, when you download this, the icon that you see once you download this looks exactly like BLHeli-S configurator, so don't get confused. Just make sure that you download it from this exact link that I show you and you'll be fine. Everything is the same. You want to connect a battery to it before you hit connect. Obviously you want to make sure you're not connected to Betaflight. And first you want to click flash. Make sure that your ESC firmware is chosen and you're going to want to use 16.9. So make sure 16.9 is chosen, and then you're going to choose flash and make sure you do that for all of your ESCs. Now I did mine already, so you're not going to see it actually happen here. But last thing I want to point out is this is where you go to change your motor direction. So if your motors aren't spinning the right way, this is where you do it. All right, moving over to the left, these are the settings that I like to use. I like to keep it at 24 kilohertz, mainly because I prefer to have the extra torque response running it at 24. You can try the other ones, 48 and 96, if you want to get a little bit more flight time at the cost of a little bit of torque response. Totally up to you guys. But once this is flashed, you guys are done. This is it. All right, congratulations. You made it to the end. Hopefully you didn't let the magic smoke out. If you didn't, just check your motor direction, put your props on, and go out and have some fun. And don't forget to check out the Facebook group. It's called the Omograd Crew. If you need any help, the community over there is really awesome. If you have any questions about running some different components, I'm sure people over there will help as well. Or if you just want to share your videos, let us know. So, all right, fellas, I'll see you guys on the next one. Go have some fun.